Today on the Transplant Helper, it's time for yet another edition of Ripped from the Headlines, the time when I sit down, discuss with you the latest news in the transplant world, how oftentimes it's strictly based on lies, misleading headlines, that sort of thing, but today is completely different. Stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button and click the bell notification to become part of the Transplant Helper community. Hey, Transplant Helper community, my name is Jim Merle. I'm sitting around today killing time looking through my Google News app, which happens to be my preferred app, even though I'm an Apple iPhone user. But anyway, looking through the Google News app, I find this headline put out by the Washington Post, and it reads as follows. The U.S. organ transplant system is broken, but the latest fix will make it worse. Now, for the first time in this series of videos, I have to admit, this headline is in no way misleading. It's certainly not a lie. It's based on absolute truth, and I believe it's totally right, okay? I believe the U.S. transplant system is broken in a sense, and yes, I believe the latest fix listed in this article will absolutely make things worse. Now, if you'd like to read the article for yourself, I'll be sure to put it in the description below. There'll be a link to it. You can go on over and read it for yourself. But basically, the gist of this article is about how some harebrained, basically stupid bureaucrat, I don't know if they're Democrat, Republican, I don't even care, I have no idea, but basically a group of folks got around a round table and decided that they wanted to fix the organ donation problem in America. Now, we have to admit, we do not have supply and demand met here in the United States, meaning that there are much more people waiting for transplant than those who are willing to donate. That is a problem. It has been a problem. There are oftentimes solutions offered up, such as the opt-out system versus the opt-in, that sort of thing. That's not even what this was about. This is about someone who decided one of the better ways to fix the organ donation process and how the organs are allocated as far as region, as far as, how they're allocated across the country, is to basically take the existing regions and expand them. Take all these regions and expand them basically to an unlimited group of people. For example, right now, as it currently stands, someone who lives in Alabama, they're basically going to be able to donate an organ out to a certain region, unless there are no people there in that region that need that, and an extremely high demand patient, say in another region across the country, that organ is not going to leave Alabama and or its region, okay? And so these circles, they're not exactly circles, but these grouping of states and such as that make up these regions really keep things fairly localized. So most of the organs that are donated in one certain area go to that area, and that's pretty much the end of the game. Now, with technology like it is, especially things like airliners, things being able to fly so quick, the use of drones coming in the future. So they claim, they're saying that they could really kind of help this out by making it more possible for someone, say, totally on the West Coast to receive an organ from someone on the East Coast. And I see where that's a need, and I see where that's a great thing, okay? Please don't misunderstand what I'm talking about. However, their ideas don't really surround distance. They're not really talking about how far it is and how long an organ can be viable from one place to another, and if technology allows them to get it there in the right amount of time. That's not what this discussion is about. No, really, this discussion is about supplying organs for people who are in large cities scattered all over the country, say cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Boston, just a few examples, but it's really about trying to supply organs for people in those areas, larger cities, where organ donation is at a low, okay? Now, typically what they claim in the article, and I agree this is probably the case, typically the highest rate of organ donation exists either in the Midwest, say around Texas, Oklahoma area, or in the Southeast, such as Alabama, Georgia, Florida, that sort of thing. That's where the rate of organ donation is at its highest. Now, the lowest areas of organ donation actually exist out around the large cities, say down the West Coast, such as California, and the larger cities, say up in the Northeast, such as New York, that sort of thing, the Boston area. That's where the lowest number of organs are being donated. Now, they really don't understand scientifically or statistically statistically why that is. Some of us Southerners may suggest that people are not as friendly or caring there. That's probably an outright lie. There are great people all over the United States who are willing to give the gift of life, but, for whatever reason, they don't necessarily donate as often. Now, others claim that that could be because, and I think this is possible here, that because the cities are so large, they don't feel that personal connection with someone, say, who's had an organ transplant in the past. So they don't know as many people who've been through this, and they really just can't visualize the impact that such a gift can have. And that likely could be the case. I live in a small town. I happen to know several people who have found the gift of life, at least in my area, been able to get to know them because that's just the way we live down here in the South. But anyway, so we typically understand a little bit better the need for organ donation, typically have more sympathy toward organ donation, whatever. So statistically, again, the rates of organ donation are higher in the South and also the Midwest than they are in the North or the extreme West. So, that's just the way things lie out. But anyway, that set aside, basically they mentioned a few things in this article. They mentioned one example where people from these large cities, say out in the extreme West or extreme Northeast, are actually moving toward the South just where they can get into that organ pool, okay? They had to take a shot at Steve Jobs, the former head of Apple, who's now passed away. They took a shot at him and how that he actually, even though he was basically a resident of California, made residency in Tennessee at one point because he needed a liver transplant. So he comes to Tennessee where organ donation rates are higher, where the possibility of getting an organ was higher, where the wait times were lower, and boom, here he was. He received a liver transplant. Now, if you remember back, Steve Jobs actually did that kind of on the cover of everything. It wasn't necessarily publicized until later in life when he eventually passed away. Then they admitted some of this. But anyway, he's the example that they use. And we've oftentimes cited that, even in the transplant world, as being something that's a little bit hard to swallow, because oftentimes people who have more money or access to money oftentimes have an unlimited resource available to them to say relocate. For example, myself, I was transplanted in Alabama at UAB Hospital. I live an hour and a half or less from the hospital, depending on how traffic is. I really wouldn't have had the money to go to, say, California or New York or Boston or Chicago or any other city. I didn't have the resources and the money to go there. I couldn't be listed in those other states. It just wouldn't have been an option. Thankfully, I was in a high organ donation region, so I got my heart transplant. That's the way things work. So oftentimes people argue and say, even though transplant, the United Network for Organ Sharing list, is totally fair as far as, it doesn't look at the color of your skin necessarily. It doesn't look at your place in society. It certainly doesn't look at income levels and such. On one hand, on the other, there's always going to be an imbalance there because people who have access to resources have access to going from one side of the country to another, or maybe multiple listings all over the country. Yeah, things like that are going to happen. But that's, again, not really what this argument is about. This is about someone who sits around a round table, a whole group of people, and they decide that if they can just take the regions as they are and expand them out, then they can maybe ship some of these organs that are homegrown in the South, say like my state of Alabama, take someone who's born, raised, makes a decision to become an organ donor, and if they pass, they become, to a position where they're ready to donate, they can ship those organs off to, say, someone in California, New York, or over here, over there, who have the higher need for that. And again, I'm totally agreeing. Please don't misunderstand this. I agree that the highest risk patient should get the first help, okay? Whoever's sickest should have access. However, is that supposed to come at a cost that, say, someone in Alabama is waiting a transplant, laying there just as sick, but then they decide, you know what, because we hadn't had enough transplants in Los Angeles, California, we should take this organ and fly it way over there and bypass a number of people who may be matches? Absolutely not. Best match, sickest patients first. That's what the priority ought to be. And a secondary priority to that, if there are any more, is that it should be contained within the region, in the closest place. And you say, well, Jim, that's not going to be fair. I'm watching your program, have for a while. I'm one of the people you're talking about because, I tried to get a transplant where I was located. My transplant center wouldn't list me. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about someone who tried to be listed in an area and the transplant center wouldn't list him, who tried to be listed in an area and say the transplant center just admitted, hey, we can't handle your case. You're going to have to go somewhere where they got more technology, more access. You got to go somewhere else. I've got a friend right now who was transplanted almost halfway across the country because our local transplant center said they couldn't handle her case and they referred her to Houston, Texas. Okay. So I'm totally with that. I'm okay with that. But I'm talking about someone who's sitting around, floating around the internet, looking for the highest chances of getting a donation in the shortest amount of time and just spotting, for example, say I'm here in Alabama, I Google search organ donation. I find out, hey, if I fly out to California, I'll be sure to get an organ. That's not fair, folks. That's not fair. Neither is it fair for someone who, say, is in California to say, well, look at there. If I go down to Georgia or Tennessee or Alabama or Florida, I can be transplanted in 6 weeks instead of 6 months. That is not fair, folks. In this article right here, and what is being planned to be done, or supposedly they're trying to implement, whether it'll ever happen, I don't know, basically says that ought to be done. That anyone from anywhere ought to be able to just raise their hand and say, hey, looky, we don't have enough organ donors here, so let's start transporting organs in from states that have organs, sucking them into our region and making those people available for transplant. No, not at the priority of bypassing someone who's currently in need in a current state, a current region, not taking organs from one state away from someone who's waiting to carry them somewhere else. Here's the real solution. Take your bureaucracy table or whatever that is. I tried to make a word up and it didn't work. Could you tell? Take your table of bureaucracy, get you a can of Pledge or something, spray it down good, wipe it off, and say, here's a fresh, clean slate, let's start over. There's only 2 ways to solve our organ donation problem. Number 1, we've got to start caring for people. We've got to start putting concern, love, connection, relationships back into the picture. And it doesn't matter if you're from Los Angeles or New York City or Munford, Alabama, my hometown, town of 1800. People have to care for people. If they're going to give the gift of life, we have to start caring for people. We have to start being one who really is concerned about the livelihood of fellow men. And until we get to that and we maintain that, we're never going to have enough organs to go around. Number 2, organ donation awareness has to be a push, okay? Just because the South, for example, the Southeastern United States has more organ donors available per capita, that's not because of anything other than we're aware, okay? If you live in one of these big cities or you live in a region of the country where organ donations are low, the only way to fix that is to get someone who cares and to teach them the benefit of being an organ donor. Teach them how lives are being changed through organ donation, period. It's not a matter of where a line is drawn. It's not a matter of what region you live in. It's not a matter of everybody who shops the web and decides, hey, if I go over here, I won't have to wait as long. That's not the way to do it. Everyone stays at home in their area as far as technology can carry them. Again, I'm not against someone who can't be transplanted in a certain center going to the next one or the next one to be transplanted just because of technology. I'm not against that. But we need to start staying at home in our regions and fair will become fair. Okay? There's enough population in these big cities to bring organ availability to a point where it ought to be if awareness is raised and love is shown. Period. Now, I get it. There'll be a lot of different opinions on this. You may read the article, for example, and not even get the same thing out of it I did. But I'll tell you, the way it sounded, their plans, they may as well not implement any of that or even try because we got to get to a point. So if you are a transplant patient, April is organ donation month or whatever it is, it's green month, it's blue month. You see how ignorant I am, I don't know. But it's organ donation awareness month, and we need to be doing that. We need to be raising awareness for the gift of life and how important it can be to someone like you and I. Thank you so much for joining me today. I don't mind you leaving your comments in the description. In the comment section below. Tell me what you think about this. Tell me what your plans are. Maybe you've got a solution. I don't know. Just be a part of the community. Until next time, friends, stay stronger.